day,
Yep.
are we allowed to stay in and vote on that?
I
Welcome everyone to the meeting of the North East Derbyshire District Council Cabinet. I'll start by just notifying everyone that we are under fairly uncharted territory at the moment. We've had a major IT malfunction, which has meant that Cabinet members aren't able to access their papers, so we're having to do our very best. So I hope that you'll be able to bear with us in introducing the papers to the best of our ability. I'll start with apologies for absence. We have apologies from Mark Foster, Councillor Mark Foster, and Councillor Jeremy Kenyon. I don't believe there are any others to record. No. Are there any declarations of interest from any members? Councillor Charlotte Cupit and I would like to record that although we were previously on the Ricknold Homes Limited board, we have both now resigned. So there is a paper later on that deals with some housing issues, but that we no longer have an interest in those in that issue. So we are able to stay in the meeting and vote at that stage. Okay, we'll move on to the minutes of the last meeting. Has everyone had a chance to read them and can confirm that they're a true and accurate record?
Yeah. I'll move them, Chairman.
Thank you. All in favour, raise your hand, please. Thank you. Okay. And then we come to the corporate plan targets performance update. So this relates to Q4 of our first year of administration, but when we were still adopting the previous administration's corporate plan. So I'll hand over to Kath, if you're okay, Kath, just to give us a short summary of the report, if that's okay.
No, that's absolutely fine. So as you've just said, this is the last quarterly performance of the transitional targets that were brought over for 1920. So just really by summary, you'll see from the report that all the targets have been achieved apart from a few that were affected by COVID in that last quarter. So a largely positive report. Quite a few of the targets are still targets under the new council plan and will continue to be monitored. So we won't lose sight of some of these things that have run through the council for some time. So it's just really to complete the record, and that it's there for public consumption, that it's largely been successful, the targets, which is obviously great for officers and members concerned. It's been a team effort in getting these targets achieved. Obviously, towards the end of March, it was getting more difficult with some of the targets with COVID, and that will obviously reflect also in the Q1 report going forward, but we'll clearly reference that in the report so members are aware of that.
Thank you, Kath, for that. So obviously the next Q1 report will be based on the new council plan and the new targets and KPIs, etc.
It will. So we'll start to do the formal recording of that through the cabinet every quarter. So that'll be obviously more relevant and of more interest to people going forward. But this just closes for audit purposes the last council plan transition. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you for that, Kath. Any other comments or questions from cabinet members?
No.
If not, are we happy to? I'm happy to move the recommendations. Do I have a seconder? 4 seconders and myself. So we'll consider that moved. Okay, thank you for that. So next paper is the medium-term financial plan budget monitoring report, April to June 2020 Q1 report. So I'll hand over to you, Paul, to take us through this paper.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, this is the medium-term financial plan budget monitoring for April. Slightly delayed, but not terribly so. And I think the best thing to do is actually, since I will struggle to see the papers and haven't got the papers in front of me, other than what's on screen, I think I'll ask Officer Dethick just to talk us through this one.
Okay, over to you, Jane. Thank you.
If only I could turn my microphone on, I'd be happy to do that. I'm sorry about that delay. Yeah, just briefly to run this through. I think a lot of you are aware of these issues because I've been bringing updates prior to this Q1 update. COVID-19 has had quite an impact on Q1. We are entering the recovery phase. We are starting to get some normality, I would like to say, back into delivery of our services. And we're keen to get some stability back into the budget for this year. So we're hoping to bring the revised budget to October's meeting so we can get budget holders back taking some control of their budgets and try and get a little bit more normality back into the system. We've received £1.2 million worth of grants from the government so far, which we've put into the Resilience Reserve to protect against the costs of COVID. We've also received some additional information just this week from MHCLG, which has advised that we're going to also benefit from the income loss scheme, which looks like we're going to get some support for our leisure centres. After the first 5%, it seems, and the devil's always in the detail with these things, but it seems that we're going to get 75 pence in every pound of the difference between our budgeted income and our actual income as a result of COVID, which almost sounds too good to be true. So we'll watch this space and what the detail says, but that will be incredibly helpful. Cash flow was a bit of a concern to us at the outset, but it's held up really, really well. Getting the advance payment of government grants and the deferred payments on the business rates has helped us a lot. We're going to keep a close eye on this because I think there's a lot of speculation that once the furlough scheme ends, we may end up with more difficulties with cash collection. But currently, council tax is only 1.4% below where we were this time last year, which is remarkable in considering the circumstances that we're operating in. Business rates is not faring quite so well. That's at 86%, where we forecast 98% last year. So a little bit more of a concern with business rates, as you'd probably expect. Everything else is holding its own. Fees and charges are low, as you'd expect in the activity-based services such as leisure, but planning fees, trade, waste and industrial units are all holding up relatively well. So it's quite an optimistic picture that we're painting at the moment. In terms of the overall position with the general fund, it's almost on budget, which you'd expect because we did an emergency budget for COVID only a couple of months ago. So we're only 132k adrift. Majority of that's within income, and again, mainly planning fees. Nothing really major to report on that one. The HRA's not really been affected by COVID. That's pretty stable, and the capital programmes obviously under at the moment because we paused a lot of the activity, which we're now starting to release the restrictions on that in a cautious manner. Appendix 4 just goes through some treasury management activity. It doesn't really give you a great deal of additional information on what you normally receive, not really affecting the treasury management position because the cash flows held. That could have been quite a different position, but it's not. So I'm happy to take any questions before I move back to Councillor Parkin to move the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Jane, for that. Any questions from members or officers for that matter? Oh, Carolyn, I can see your hand raised.
Yeah, well done, Jane and team. Obviously, very difficult circumstances. Although there's been some quite significant financial package for business in particular, and whilst lots of businesses are weathering the storm, has there been anything from government in terms of projections? Because I think next year, when the support's not there, is when we're going to have perhaps our more severe issues. And I was interested to know if any of that discussion had taken place through any government channels.
Through you, Chair. Not as yet, Councillor Rennick. I've not heard anything about what they're planning for next year. Of course, the business rates holiday is the big one. That'll be the really interesting one, is to see whether they extend that for different areas of the sector and again for the retail and hospitality sector. Because although the grant was nice, I think the business rates holiday is much more helpful because it lasts for the duration of this financial year. So we've not heard anything as yet, but as soon as I do, I will let you know.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jane. Any other questions for Jane? If not, I'll hand back to you, Paul, to summarise and move recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to move recommendations in section 6, 6.1 in this case, that the Cabinet knows the budget monitoring position outlined in this report.
Thank you for that. I'll second, and then we can move to the vote. Thank you. All those in favour? Yeah, okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. And then we move on to the financial outturn paper for 2019-20. So over to you, Paul, again then. Or do you want to go straight to Jane?
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is the slightly delayed, but not too much, financial outturn. And I will leave it to Jane to give you the detail on this. As I say, we're struggling with some IT problems at the moment, but yes, if you would, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Parkin. Yes, as Councillor Parkin says, this is the financial outturn position from the 31st of March, which is a little bit delayed, but I have to say I was delighted to be able to produce the accounts by the 17th of June. My team worked incredibly hard under very difficult circumstances to get them done only 2 weeks later than the statutory deadline. So it was challenging at times, but we got there in the end. So Mazars have been auditing us. I put that they were auditing us over the past 3 weeks, which was 3 weeks ago, but it still seems to be ongoing. But they've had a few staffing issues, I think. So I spoke to the audit manager just last week, and he's not reported any major issues. They're looking at something around pensions, but that's a national issue as opposed to a local issue to us. So I'm just waiting to hear whether that will need a change to the accounts, which if it does, we'll amend those before they go to the audit committee on the 30th of September. In terms of the actual outturn position, Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 shows the general fund position. We were £147,000 underspent, which have moved to the resilience reserve, as was agreed in the MTFP. The main variances are pay, which is predominantly vacancy savings, and NNDR. NNDR is below budget because we couldn't forecast any growth at the point of producing the accounts because the Derbyshire pool hadn't been settled and the NNDR3 was delayed. We've generally taken the view across the pool that we're not going to amend this year's figures. It creates quite a lot of work for the administrative body at Derby City Council. So I think we're all going to stick with our position and make the adjustments in the following year, which the auditors are all happy with. So it just saves a little bit of confusion with changing the accounts at such a late stage. We've got 3 budgets that we need to roll over into the new financial year. There's £11,000 for mowers, which was due to a delay in the supply chain. There was £17,500 for some remedial works that are needed at Wingworth Lido, which we didn't finish in 1920, which we're going to continue to do in 2021. And then there was a health and safety training budget that the health and safety team just couldn't organise in time for the end of the financial year. Reserves in and out totaling 1.9 million and 1.2. That's all detailed in 1.7 and 1.8. I won't go through those in too much detail, but I'll be happy to take any questions. HRA, very few variances again. We contributed an underspend of 304,000 to the development reserve, which is great because that can invest in future projects. And the HRA balance at 3 million is retained. The capital programme was underspent, but as is the norm with the capital programme, we are rolling those balances over, and there's a recommendation at 6.3 should you choose to support it to do so. Happy to take any questions and then move back to Councillor Parkin for 6.1 to 6.3 to be moved.
Thank you, Jane. Any questions from members? Just to echo Carolyn's words during the last paper of thanks to you, Jane, and your team for the incredible amounts of hard work you've had to go through in almost radically redefining the budget overnight to be able to allow us to cope with the pressures and strains of COVID, and also in terms of getting the statutory accounts done so quickly. So well done to all of your team.
Thank you for that.
I'll hand over then to Paul to move the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, and just an extra note there. When we took some rather stringent actions on spending for the COVID budget that we implemented, the knock-on effect of that was a significant amount of extra work for the staff within the finance department, and we're very, very grateful for everybody's efforts in the department. So yes, I'd like to move recommendations 6.1, 6.2 and 6.3, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that again. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. If we could just go back to the agenda, Amy, because I'll need to read out the final bits. So are there any urgent items? I don't believe I have any on my radar. Exclusion of the press and public. I move that the public be excluded from the meeting during the discussion of the following items of business to avoid the disclosure to them of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006. So I move that the public be excluded, and can we confirm that the live stream has been stopped?
Just check for you, Chair.
Thank you.